We are thrilled to get to celebrate Christmas with you in the heart of downtown Westchester. If you're joining Project 938 for the very first time, then you might be here tonight because you saw the words Christmas in Westchester advertised around town, or you got a postcard or an invitation in the mail. But regardless of how you got here tonight, thanks so much for allowing us the opportunity to celebrate Christmas with you. If you did happen to go on our website, christmasinwestchester.com, or take a look at the front of your bulletin, then you know that we are in the midst of a series right now called Recapture the Wonder. And no matter what stage of life we might find ourselves in, I think that we can all probably recall the songs and the story of Christmas. But it can be so easy just to race through Christmas and just completely miss it. Pausing isn't necessarily embedded in our DNA as a society, and if you're like me, you tend to run from one thing to the next. And so I don't know what it took to get you here tonight, or to get your family here tonight, maybe some sort of Christmas miracle. But however you got here tonight, we hope that you feel the friendship and the community around you. And more importantly, we hope that you're able to recapture the wonder of the Christmas story. The story of Jesus, the Savior. We're going to sing songs that we all love, and you can take a look at your bulletin and follow along in the lyrics. And then we're going to do a special creative expression called spoken word. That might be a little bit different to some of you. But we're going to go back in time to the very first Christmas story. It had been over 400 years since the people of God had heard from a prophet. And they were wondering if God would remember them. If God had heard them. If God would meet them.
Years, for centuries, 4 centuries, God has been silent in our time of need. Doesn't He know? Can't He hear our screams, but we scream with no response, dream that only once He would answer, but silence. When our ancestors cried out, He answered. At least that's what they say, so we anxiously anticipate the day when He will hear our cries, see our pain, because right now, God, it seems like either you ain't there or you don't care. We've been in bondage and chains, enslaved and shame. We've been made a laughing stock. We've lost everything that we have got, and worst of all, we lost our hope, because you said you'd always be there. You said you'd never go, so where were you when we lost our home? We've been crying out for years. Can you hear us? Do you tear up when our feet is up? Is it sheer luck we made it this far, or did you play any part? Because I'd love to know that I can count on you, but you've been so quiet. I'm surrounded by silence, screaming into the void of nothingness that exists. I'm amidst my prayers, bend to make it to the ceiling before they bounce back empty. What do I have to do to know that you're near me? Are you even near me? Can you even hear me? Are you even real? Really? Because God, it don't feel like it. I'm starting to wonder if those stories are true, and if you even exist, because if you did, I wouldn't be facing these afflictions, bound by these restrictions, because right now it seems like an all-loving and all-powerful God is a contradiction. But they tell me to hold on to the faith and hope and trust, and it's tough, but if I'm really be honest, the wonder of all of those seems more optimistic than luck. So if you're really real, then please come. Come, oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom your captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here until your Son appears. For we want to know that you have seen the pain buried within our eyes. We want to know that you can empathize, that you have felt our cries from all of those nights of silence. And now on this silent night, I hear a sound surround, breaking the ground, shaking the ground, waking the town, making us bound, taking us down to find the soul. unmistakable sound. For you show you have heard our cries by breaking the silence with the cry of a baby. And now, after centuries of patiently waiting and anticipating, you have spoken at last. So let us rejoice, rejoice, for Emmanuel has come to you, O Israel.
Rachel said it is so good to be here in downtown Westchester, the Lion Space. I hope you recognize that story. First time I heard that story, it was told to me by Linus from the Charlie Brown Christmas special. And some of us, that may be the only time we've ever heard that story, and it certainly didn't mean that much to me then. It meant more to me when I became an adult and I would come back to that story. And tonight we're going to reflect on that story in two little snippets. I'll come up now and I'll be back a little bit later. Earlier you were able to hear from our kids and student director, Kevin Giannotti. He was our spoken word artist. You'll hear from him again as well. My name is Mark Lucenius, and I'm the pastor here at Project 938. And again, so glad that you could be with us. I haven't told this story before, like this whole set of events. We did this last night, and we had 200 people. It was so much fun, like 2 different times. It was a great time. Well, so I have told the story last night. I'm telling it again today. It started out as a favor to some friends. They were planning on being medical missionaries in Central Asia, and he was graduating medical school, and they needed somebody to watch the kids for his graduation. So Kathleen and I volunteered, and we were happy to do it. We love this family. And somewhere along the week, something happened, and Kathleen couldn't be there, which is no problem. I love kids, and I have no problem. I'll be there to watch those kids, and which is no big deal, except somewhere along the line Friday afternoon I had a realization. And I started getting quite panicky about it. I was really anxious about it, and that's not like me. But I waited until Kathleen got home, and I brought this up. I said, one of those kids is like a baby, right? Like one of those, like the ones that wear diapers, right? I don't know if I'm gonna have to do something with that or not. It's only going to be 4 hours. I think I'm going to have to change the diaper. And she said, yes, you're going to have to change the diaper, and you can do this. And so she went over to bed, and she grabbed Mustafa, our nice soft cuddly teddy bear. Not Mufasa, Mustafa. All right, so his name's Mustafa. And she laid him out, grabbed a dish towel, and said, this is how the diaper goes on. And this is what you do with the diaper. This is how you take it off. This is how you make sure everything's cleaned up. And then this is how you put it back on. And so I practiced a couple times with Mustafa. I'm feeling pretty confident. I'm on my way the next day and getting there. And sure enough, I'm going to at age 28, to my first official babysitting gig. Well, I got thrown right into the action right as soon as I got there. I came in the house and they're like, hey, Sophie needs a diaper. Why don't you go change it? You can do it right on the floor. I mean, she's third born, so she's like, whatever, right? And they're going to be missionaries in Central Asia, so me taking care of their kid was the last thing on their mind. So anyway, but I do think it was the test. I don't think they thought I had ever done this before. Anyway, I got down on my knees. Sophie and I, we got that diaper changed out, and we were ready to go. And feeling pretty good. Mom and Dad leave, and they're gone for a while, and having fun with the kids, and the time comes for Sophie to be put down for a nap. And so Sophie and I go into the bedroom, and I change her diaper, and she has to get out of her PJs too, so I get a shirt on, put on the pants, and I lay sweet Sophie down. Here's the thing you need to know about Sophie. Probably the sweetest, quietest, gentlest baby ever. I mean, next to Mustafa, I couldn't have had an easier first run when it comes to changing diapers. So this is great. So I put sweet little Sophie down for a sweet little nap, and she was right asleep, and she's asleep for, until parents come home. Parents come home, and I leave, and I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like Lowe's commercial good. Like I'm ready to take on a real challenge, like learn to fold a fit a sheet. And next day I go back to church, and I'm looking for the dad. I'm looking for another attaboy. Man, I did that all by myself. Anyway, so, and he seems like, hey, Mark, man, the boys had a really good time with you, and you really seem to have a real nice bond with Sophie as well. Yeah, we connected, yeah. Anyway, so he said, well, when I went to go pick her up from her nap, she was standing, but she was standing kind of funny. Like, she was kind of wobbling. She was holding on the side of the rail. She was kind of wobbling, and her feet were like really close together, like right together, like this. And he says, as I was looking at her, I looked up, and then I noticed that there's this thing hanging off her hip, like this extra pant leg was hanging off her hip. And it turns out that after changing Sophie's diaper, I got the shirt on, and I jammed both of the pant legs in one pant leg, and I laid sweet Sophie down for a nap, where she took a sweet nap and woke up to wonder why her legs don't work anymore. I tell this story because it's an earthy story, which is very similar to the Christmas story. The Christmas story has an unbelievable contrast of real, genuine earthiness and utter large-scale politics. And we'll start with the first two characters. There's Jesus, who is literally getting swallowed with cloths. And the other contrast is Caesar. If you remember the story, as Catherine and Linus had told us, from the gospel writer Luke, Caesar is in a palace, and he is decreeing and doing his things that the most powerful people in the world do. They decree and everybody acts. And sure enough, Caesar's doing what powerful people do. He decrees and everybody gets to work, right? And so he decrees that everyone needs to get registered. There goes the entire world, just scrambling around, going to wherever they need to do to get registered. Basically, he wants to know how many people he can send into war and how many people he can tax. And so he's acting like a powerful person, like powerful people do. And then you have this contrast with Jesus, who needs to be swallowed. Jesus, the other character, cannot keep himself warm. Here's the benefits of swallowing, not too tight, not too loose, is that you keep the baby warm, and the baby is comforted. And the baby has a sense that things are going to be okay. Because a baby, certainly a newborn baby, they can't control their arms and their legs. And so if they're just left out there flopping their arms and legs around, well, they're going to feel somewhat out of control. And so when you wrap them nice and tight, well, they feel that, well, someone's in control here. Which brings us to, in my mind, the most significant thought when it comes to Christmas, is that Emmanuel, God with us, needed to be swallowed. God needed to be comforted. God needed to be held. God needed to be loved. God needed to be parented. God needed, in that oh so delicate newborn consciousness, to know that someone's in control. God needed this. And which bears the question, why? I would suggest that God came to experience our insufficiency. Jesus was insufficient to eat his own body. Jesus was insufficient to control his own arms and legs. Jesus was insufficient to the point that he needed to know that somebody else was going to care for him. And he was going to experience that. We experience insufficiency, and I in particular do, and I don't like it. And I will avoid the feeling of insufficiency as much as I can. It's just not a good feeling. I did last weekend what I do every Christmas. I go to the mall to experience the mall Christmas. I actually enjoy it once. I enjoyed it once, but like I do at the mall, what ends up happening is that I walk around the mall, and with the opportunity to buy just about everything, I can never settle myself to buy anything. And I end up just going and getting a shake or something like that. What else am I going to do with myself? You just get something to eat. Because the overwhelming opportunity of everything keeps me from getting anything. And I think there's something a little bit deeper in it. There's something deeper around that. Is that, and this might be a man thing, this might be just a me thing. But like, I think about the experience of those I love and care for opening up a Christmas gift from me. And I have this self-assessment that goes on. Did I give them something sufficient? Did I give them something sufficient for who they are and what they mean to me? And increasingly, the answer is no. Particularly for those whom I love and I care for, like Kathleen, my wife, or my kids. I know, based upon how I feel about them, that I cannot give them a gift in proportion to my care. It's an experience of insufficiency. It's this funky little trick that Christmas does to me. But I have to be careful with this, and I think we all have to be careful with this, because none of us really like the feeling of insufficiency. And so oftentimes, when presented with that, we'll do a little trick on ourselves. Just staying with the gift-giving thing, all right? Imagine a scenario. I'm not saying this has ever happened, but imagine, like, let's say you have a kid, and they really love this teacher. And they're like, it's time to bring the gift to the teacher today, Dad. And you're like, well, yeah, we got a $5 gift card for Dunkin' Donuts. There you go. And they're like, what? No, this is the best teacher ever. That's what we give the other teachers. Oh, we want to give this teacher really great. And you're like, no, that teacher's not that good. This teacher's just fine. You know, they work hard. You know, they get these things all the time. They're not that good. With the option of feeling insufficient, I begin to reduce the value of the one. Rather than me feeling insufficient, I reduce the value of the person that might receive that gift in order to even the playing field. I'd rather not feel insufficient. So that teacher isn't that good. We can do this in other ways. Because the thing here is, you can't have wonder without at least a little bit of insufficiency. We'll get to that. Think about what it feels like to be sufficient to the challenges. Think about the challenges in life. If there's a challenge that you might not feel sufficient for, or that might expose your insufficiency, a lot of folks just back off that thing. They back off the opportunity to experience maybe something new, or to try something new, or to do something new, or to have a new kind of conversation that might open up a relationship into something new. Why? Because we don't feel sufficient to it. And when we avoid sufficiency, when we avoid the feeling of insufficiency, I I would suggest we cancel out the option to experience wonder and awe. Because we begin shrinking the world to something we can control. Something where we can feel sufficient. Something that we can feel powerful. Something that we can feel morally right in. And that's the other thing. If we need to be right, and there's somebody who is wrong, or another group of people that would say we're not right, we look for ways to make them wrong so that we can hold on to the feeling of being right. And we lose the wonder of those around us. As a church, we've been talking this whole December about recapturing the wonder. And as we've reflected on this, we've thought about the God who flung the galaxies. Galaxies that outnumber the sand on the seashore. Galaxies with hundreds of thousands of stars within each of those galaxies. The God who created that became a crying baby. Insufficient. But in God's insufficiency, He opens up a way for us to experience wonder again. Gives us the opportunity to experience and recapture a wonder that we might naturally close ourselves off from. We might hold ourselves back from. Why? Because we don't want the feeling of insufficiency. That wasn't Jesus. Jesus is like that. He came to experience our insufficiency and exposed himself to the elements, exposed himself to the cold, exposed himself to a broken world, exposed himself to swaddling and rookie parents. But in God's insufficiency, and because of God's insufficiency, we call this the most wonderful time. That's what the song invites us to. But there's a sense of wonder in that, and there's a sense that can we actually get our hands around all of that? We'll come back to that. Let's think about the other characters in the story. We have Joseph, we have Mary, and we have the shepherds. We know that Joseph and Mary made their way down to Bethlehem where Jesus was born, and then the shepherds were out in the fields by night watching their flocks, and then the angel shows up to make an announcement. The angel breaks out of heaven into this world. You wouldn't expect it. There's a scene in, I believe it's the 6th Harry Potter book, well, and probably the 6th movie, that's it's just out of character with the rest of the story. Almost all of the Harry Potter books, they all function and they all act within the magical world. Within the magical world, within the wizarding world. And rarely does the real world of non-magical people and the wizarding world come together. Well, in this scene, one of the wizards shows up in the office of the Prime Minister of England. And it just was weird. It just didn't necessarily fit. Now, he had a good reason to be there because the bad guy Voldemort was going to take over the wizarding world, and then he was going to take over the non-magical world, and it was going to get really, really ugly. And in those sorts of situations, you go tell somebody important, like the Prime Minister of England. We had a very, very similar situation going on with the angels. You had someone coming from outside of this world saying, look, there's a new king and he's arriving. And you wouldn't expect him to go to the fields. You expect him to go see Caesar in Caesar's palace. Not the one in Las Vegas. But you'd expect him to go see at least somebody in a palace, like Quirinius or Tiberius or Herod. There are important people in the world that ought to be warned about this, or at least you ought to announce it to somebody, and somebody ought to give this the proper publicity that it deserves. But the angels go to pretty much the least important people. Everybody was more important than shepherds and Joseph and Mary. Everybody was more important than those people. But the angels come to them. The shepherds in those days would sleep out in the fields. They would sleep with their flocks to protect the flocks. They were exposed to the elements. And it is suggested that people who are most open to change, or most open to seeing things different, those who are most open to something maybe from outside of this world, are those who are exposed. There's something about exposure that reveals insufficiencies, that gives us an openness to, well, maybe this isn't the way it ought to be. And so I have a theory that, well, certainly if you close yourself off to insufficiency, you close yourself off to all all the wonders that you can experience through that. But I think that there's a reason why we avoid insufficiency and therefore shut ourselves out to seeing the wonders of this world and its exposure right in the middle. Because we've exposed ourselves to certain things and we've tried out a friendship here, or we've tried out a new way of living here, we've tried out a relationship with this person, or we've tried extending ourselves in this way, and in that exposure we've gotten burned, and so what have we done? We've backed up and we said, I'm not going to try that again. Some of us, we've tried out church, and it didn't go so well, and we said, maybe I'm going to not try that again. And so, rather than be exposed to something out there that might introduce us to wonder, well, it may also introduce us to insufficiency as well. We hold back. I learned about exposure as a technical term while hiking through the Grand Canyon. I was in the Grand Canyon and we were there with guides. And this is how I would hear the term. They would bring the hiking group together and they said, okay, we're going to go on a hike today on a scale of 1 to 10. You're going to experience level 7 exposure. And me being like suburban dude who say, what is that? What do you mean by exposure? Oh, exposure to death. See, here's the thing. On this hike, there's going to be cliffs, and if you fall down, you'll die. And the Grand Canyon is a high exposure place. I mean, there's nothing really about it that's hospitable in any way to anything, right? So if you're in the sun, it's generally over 100 degrees. If you want to go get in the Colorado River to cool off, you're really going to cool off because it's usually around 50 degrees. And in between the 100 degrees in the sun and the 50 degrees in the water, nothing lives. I mean, like, even the coyotes look awful there. You can't find a coyote. You can't find anything alive in there. There's this random brush that it may not be actually alive. We don't know. I mean, it's just barely there. And the Grand Canyon is almost all exposure. And the further you go in, the more you're exposed. But the more you experience the Grand Canyon, the more you experience one of the 7 wonders of the world. And those who have been exposed to it in that way are never the same thereafter. Exposure brings with it inherent risk, but inherent opportunity to wonder, to see, to experience. Now, thankfully, we don't necessarily need to go 2,000 miles to experience wonder. The ancient Hebrews, in one of their Psalms, when they reflected on humanity, they said, people sitting next to you, each one of us are fearfully and wonderfully made. We sit in a room of created wonders. We sit among wonder-filled people. People made by a wonderful God, making something beautiful of each person. And I would go even further to say that every aspect that God has created in this world has been created with wonder, if we would see it. Let me suggest 3 ways, just over the next couple of days. 3 ways, 3 things you can do to open yourself up to more wonder. Actually, there are going to be 3 things you're going to give up. Give up the need to be right. Give up the need to be right. When you need to be right in a particular situation, what ends up happening is the psychological need that you have to be right means that anybody who disagrees with that is sort of an opponent to you and forces you in a situation where you objectify them, somehow needing to make them wrong so that you can feel right. I'm sure none of this ever happens around the family dinner table at Christmas time. But watch the dynamic. If you need to be right, will you make them wrong and miss out on seeing the wonder of who they are? Give up the need to be good, particularly in a moral sense. If you need to see yourself as morally good, that creates a certain entitlement for you in this world, where the things that come to you in this world are actually what you deserve. And then what you see and assess in this world is basically, did I deserve this? When we are in a posture of assessing life as to whether we deserve it or not, we often miss out on the constant flooding overtures that this world gives us of constant breath, constant life, of water, of warmth, of friendship, of community, of food, even bad food, but quite often very good food that continues to grace our lives. But if you've established yourself as morally good, then you have leverage on this world as to whether this world's going to treat you right, whether God's going to treat you right. But if you don't need to be morally better and morally righteous, you can just receive all the grace and the wonder that this world will pour out. Third, give up your need to think you know the meaning of Christmas. And this will be particularly hard for those who are used to going to Christmas services, or particularly hard for those who are used to going to church services. Do we really know it? Do we really get it? I mean, think back to the story. Think about the shepherds, okay? Shepherds are there in the fields, watching their flocks by night, and an angel shows up. Gabriel says, I got good news and great joy that's going to be for all the people. And today, in the town of Bethlehem, a Savior has been born to you. He is Christ the Lord. This is very, very good news. And then there's this big choir of all the angels literally lighting up the sky. And like all the angels show up and they sing glory to God in the highest and peace to this world, right? And then he says, and this is going to be a sign to you. There'll be a baby wrapped in cloths, swaddled in cloths, lying in a manger. Now, I'm not saying that that's an ordinary thing. I'm not saying it's an ordinary thing to see a baby wrapped in cloths lying in a feeding trough. But I bet it's happened before or after, certainly in the nativity scene, right? But if you want to, it's not ordinary, but if you want a sign, I think the angels and the choirs all over the night sky, that to me is a sign. If you want a sign, that is a real sign. I mean, there's a lot of babies that get born every day, right? And somewhere along the line, they're going to have to put them somewhere, and somewhere along the line, they're going to land in a feeding trough. And yes, it was kind of unique, but the angels, lighting up the sky, angels singing, that to me is a sign. Brand new babies, being born every day. But there's more meaning in that baby than 1,000 angelic choirs. Because we go back to the first song. O come, Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God with us. Well, we said that the God of this world came into this world as a baby to experience everything that we would experience. Everything. I was given an opportunity to go over to the Brandywine River Museum. And you may have, if you've been to the Brandywine River Museum, I recommend it. It's an art museum right on the Brandywine River, and it spotlights most of the artists for the Wyatt family, NC and Andrew and Jamie Wyatt. And it's tremendous. And I went through it, and it was pretty cool. I'm not I never took an art history class, but I like art. I'm kind of like, I'm kind of like a kid who went to art appreciation and going to show me art. I appreciate that. I mean, that's about as far as I go. I kind of like when I see it, I don't look for it, but I enjoyed it. Later, though, I wanted to host an event there. And because I was going to host an event there, I got to have a tour of the museum and the galleries. And the person who hosted the tour had been with the museum since the very first day. And she knew the Wyeths. And she told me the story of the Wyeths. And she took us on a breathtaking tour, showing us the art, showing us the different phases of their art, showing us the different approaches they took to the art, describing something they did with egg whites and their art, and all these random things. And it was a transformative experience as far as what I could appreciate as far as that art. I loved the art afterwards, and it changed everything I thought about it, because she had this. She knew the artist, and she was passionate about it. The only thing that would have been better is if the Wyeths themselves came and gave me a tour of the museum. Well, Jesus came to experience every aspect of humanity. He knows your experience. And because he knows your experience, I would suggest to you the way we really recapture wonder in life is to allow the artist who created every little thing, and the artist who came into the world to experience every little thing. Allow that artist who, because he experienced every little thing, made every little thing matter. Every little thing in your life matters. Every experience you have, hurt, brokenness, scandal, whatever, matters. And I would suggest to you that the way we experience wonder in this life is to allow the artist to give us the tour of our lives, so that we would know the meaning of every little thing. Because every little thing matters. Jesus would grow up. He would experience adolescence. He would experience the awkwardness of girls who have crushes on him. He would experience the entry into the workforce. He would experience singleness. He would experience betrayal. He would experience misunderstanding. He would experience scandal. He would experience suffering. He would experience hate. He would experience bad government. He would experience bad religion. These things would come together, and his life would be colluded upon. And eventually he would suffer and die a humiliating, shameful death. He would experience death. Every little thing that we will ever experience, Jesus knows it. Every little thing matters. Because every little thing matters, he can lead us through it. He would die a shameful death, but the evidence of his deity is in his resurrection. And because of his resurrection, not only does every little thing matter, Jesus enables us to overcome every little and big thing. It starts in one like that. The amazing moment when God comes into this world that one holy night. Let's pray. Jesus, we talk to you now, even as you sit in heaven, with ears to hear our prayer. Ears that were first formed in Mary's womb. Ears that heard cries. Ears that listened with compassion and still listen with compassion. We consider you as the one there before all creation, creating this world and yet entering into it.
give us once again the thrill of hope that these things could be true. The thrill of hope that yes, it was a holy night.